for the Business Women Australia Strategic Alliances panel Q&A. We're very lucky today to have two leaders in STEM. You know, I didn't really think about that, but until the STEM ladies actually got on board with us and said, "Hey, can we make this available to our members?" And I went, "Fantastic! I'm really keen to do collaborations like that." But I think the reality is that in the future, any business has to be in a technology-based business. We've realised that, I think. With COVID, you know, the ones who were just purely relying on face-to-face and thought that they could never deliver something digitally, you know, particularly perhaps in health services and those kinds of organisations, really had to recognise the importance of having a plan B and a digital plan. So Strategic Alliances is going to have a little bit, I imagine, of a STEM focus today, just merely because our ladies come from those areas. But before we start, I'd just like to welcome everyone and let you know who I am. I'm the National Director and a founder of Business Women Australia. I'd love to hear more from everyone who's come on today. We have quite a few new ladies who have joined us, and it would be really lovely for you to reach out to Lyn at businesswomenaustralia.com.au, and I'll give you my calendar link, and I'd love to have a chat to you about what's going on in your world. We acknowledge that we're meeting on sacred and sovereign Indigenous land. We're all around the nation. We're dialing in from country that has been lived on, danced and celebrated for over 120,000 years, that's sovereign Indigenous land. And we pay our respects to all Indigenous elders, past, present, and those who are emerging. And we celebrate our Indigenous sisters in business. I'm in Perth, and I'm on Whadjuk Nation, Noongar Nation, Whadjuk land, and very involved with Aboriginal people in Western Australia who have supported me and my family in many ways, teaching us and helping us really understand the long history and the beautiful culture and wisdom that comes with hundreds of thousands of years of knowledge sharing. So without further ado, I will go on and talk a little bit about Business Women Australia. If you can all just check that you're on mute, or Lucy will go down and just mute you. There's a bit of background noise coming through. Business Women Australia, for those of you that haven't had a lot to do with us, is that we are, I think, the #1 national collaborative community in Australia that's a member-based community. Everything we do is done through a co-creation model. So we don't sit down at the beginning of the year and go, "Oh, what topics will we have?" We actually co-create with our leaders, who are our premium partners in Business Women Australia. They're our knowledge sharers, women like Hayley and Kerrie-Anne, and we sort of think about, well, what is the wisdom that we can share that's going to be of value to businesses in Australia across the board, and what's going to really appeal to and help our community. So a lot of our vision is obviously achieved through helping each other achieve goals and dreams and building this network of influence. So it's really a network that is stepping up. We aren't afraid of being seen. We aren't afraid of experimenting. We're keen to learn and to trial and to, I guess, fail forward seems to be the way that we're talking about that now, and to share our knowledge and those learnings with each other. Business Women Australia is not just for business owners and entrepreneurs. It's also for directors and executives, for women in management roles, for professionals, lawyers, engineers, architects. It's a real melting pot of women across all areas and all levels of business. And I think that's really where the real magic is. But we do focus on 5 areas of development. Leadership is an area that we recognise leadership not being a title or not being a role, but being more of a way of being. So leadership can come from anywhere within an organisation, and we're very much about informing and developing knowledge around what a leadership culture is, and then what do we do as individuals that are recognised and want to facilitate a leadership culture. Business improvement's another important area we focus on. So a lot of our knowledge sharing is around, sharing business process improvements, business strategy ideas, business growth tactics, and so on. Personal growth is a very important part of what we do as well. And we have a lot of opportunities for women to get together and share their own learning journey, creating safe spaces for the development of greater self-awareness and authentic conversation. I think we've got Vida Carlino on today, who's one of our premium partners as well, and she hosts Courageous Conversations, which are really a great opportunity that are a safe space for sharing authentic thoughts and opinions and challenging our sort of conformity around some sort of biases we might hold. So there's lots of opportunities. We really try and do things in a much more deeper and meaningful way. And that comes from the values that we have. We have, being a female designed, developed, managed organisation, and I'm okay to say that. I'm very conscious of this, sort of movement at the moment that isn't wanting to be defined as female. But I also recognise that as women, we actually are the custodians of feminine energy. And feminine energy is obviously something that men and women have, but quite often we have to be the ones that really create an impact in our environments where it's okay for that feminine energy to be an important part of the decisions and the processes and the ways of being within a culture of an organisation. So when we sat down and debated amongst ourselves as designers of this business, what are the values that we want to share? And then from these values here that you can see on the screen, what are the behaviours that would then translate into how we act and how we behave? So if inclusion and diversity is an important part of what we're about, then how are we making people feel welcome when they reach out to us, when they turn up to our events, when they interact with us? How are we ambassadors for these values? And we take them very, very, seriously. So the benefits of joining, and I'd love for everyone to join, and this is not a sales pitch, you don't have to join. You're always welcome to jump online, and you could be considering membership to BWA as long as you like. We're not going to chase you up and say, hey, you've registered for 10 online events and haven't joined. That's fine if that's where you're at. Sometimes, people are on a learning journey and they're still debating about where they're fitting within their business world. And we really want you to feel welcome no matter what. But there are some great benefits of joining. And part of those benefits are that the sorts of partnerships that we've actually negotiated, one of them in particular with Torrens University is phenomenal. So for a classic membership of BWA at $299, I think it is a year, you would get access to all these short courses at no cost. There's something like 40,000 short courses. You get a certificate. They're 90 minutes. They're from everything related to the latest in thinking and knowledge, from design thinking through to artificial intelligence, adopting social media marketing. I think I did one on conflict resolution the other day with a client just to refresh our knowledge. And everything in here is up to date. I had a couple of my social media experts have a look at these to say, are they up to date? And they went, yep, these are brilliant. In fact, we learned some things from doing the short course. And another wonderful thing we offer with our great partnership with Torrens University is a scholarship program. I think we had 6 or 7 ladies take advantage of the scholarship that we opened up last year. We had a pitch fest and the gorgeous Kylie Clark from New South Wales, who's one of our members over there, who is an events guru, has won 100% scholarship. So we have 100% scholarship a year, and we're inviting expressions of interest at the moment for those scholarships. And you'll find that on the website, everything you need to know. We love social media. We're all over digital. We have a LinkedIn group. We'd love you all to join, ladies. Sorry, chaps. It's actually a non-inclusive group. It goes against our values, that one, but it just is a place that's a safe place for women and free to join. We have all our events on our Business Women Australia website. We have a Facebook page, which has loads of followings, plus a private group for classic and premium partners. And we're on Twitter and on Instagram. And our hashtags here, hashtag BWA events. And I think we use hashtag BWA leaders quite a lot. So follow us through those hashtags as well. And if you are posting anything, and we love you to post and share and tag us, particularly if you're coming along to any of our events. So we do love to be social. It is with these kinds of collaborative partners, we could not do what we do. Running an organisation like this is a social enterprise. Every dollar that we make goes back into developing programs and promoting. We don't have I'm not on salary. None of the executive. We're all sort of non-executive shareholders. We have a few amazing hardworking contractors that we pay in the background to help us with our marketing. And if it wasn't for these organisations, we just could not do what we do. So for those of you who are interested, Classic membership's $299 for 12 months, as I said. And if you're interested in becoming a premium partner and joining forces with me and having a powwow about what kind of expertise you could help build into our program, and you might have another idea about how you might want to co-host an event, or you might want to, we've had some very interesting pictures in the last week from organisations that really want to partner at almost a product level. So we're really open to doing whatever we want as a brand that women own, women design, and women can experiment with. So very open to ideas. Lots coming up. In the red are the online events. So those of you who are outside the areas where there's the face-to-face. On the Thursday, the 30th, we've got Leveraging Your Podcast Interview. A lot of our leaders are getting opportunities to be interviewed on podcasts, including the Business Women Australia podcast show. And we encourage you to join this because there's things you can do before, during, and after a podcast that will really amplify your message. On Monday the 19th, we have another online event that's developing a success mindset with a gorgeous Georgia Bamba. She's New South Wales-based psych. She's a life coach. She is awesome. And you're getting asked so many questions about, I know that I have to change my mindset, but how do I do that? How do I change my mindset? So we're actually going to go more into the sort of unpacking, how do you develop a success mindset. So I'm really looking forward to that session with Georgia as well. Lots of things coming up around the regions in Bunbury, Rockingham. We've got a face-to-face coming up in Brisbane that's booked out. In Perth, we've got another results-oriented one with Fiona Yu, who is an exporter of beautiful merino products. And she's also, I think, the only accredited Procter Gallagher consultant in Australia. So Fiona's going to be a great one for those of you who are in Perth to come along to that in her boardroom. And in Melbourne, face-to-face and developing a business network with Jessica Schubert, our head of leadership development, and Jessica's also the director of Intact Teams and a sponsor of BWA and a co-owner. So I think that one's going to be a great networking event. Fully booked with My Wine and Cheese in Sydney. So if you haven't booked for that, sorry, you've missed out. Okay, we've got what makes us different. We're social, we're fun, we're honest, we're a bit warts and all. And we really are looking at tapping into a network of women who are really aspiring to make a change in the world. I was going to do a quick boardroom Zoom intro, but I might leave that to the very end because I'm very conscious that Hayley's in Oklahoma. When we first designed this, we kind of tried to do it in a way that we might have Hayley still in Australia, but she's had to go home a little bit earlier than we expected. So what we'll do is at the end of our Q&A, we'll have another chance for some online networking where it'd be lovely for us to share sort of who you are if you can stay on sort of at the end. So I'm really excited to have these amazing ladies. Hayley's the head of strategic consulting and alliances for APAC region for Pros. Now, for those of you that don't know about Pros, they're an international New York listed company. They provide AI-based solutions that are powering the e-commerce and those digital solutions that dynamically price and configure products and services across channels. So I think Hayley's great example to me was the Qantas example. She said, you know how the prices change, and well, Pros is a lot of the artificial intelligence that goes behind that sort of pricing solution across the digital channels. So, you know, they're basically data science experts at Pros. So it's a perfect place for Hayley. She's got not only a business leader, but she's got a real strength in IT and technology. She's got over 10 years of experience in the delivery and sales of very interesting industry products across the board. She's passionate about digital transformation, and you'll get that through what she's going to share with us today. And I first met her when I first met her, I was very excited about her journey. As I said, she's in Oklahoma, and I think when we did our Buzz magazine last year, her story about coming from, I think it was coming from Oklahoma. Here it is. I did a little screenshot of it. Hayley Glasgow from Oklahoma to the land down under. This one went viral. It's fantastic, and it's a great story. And I think it really must have inspired so many people to think about, you know, you just don't know where you're going to end up in your career, and how exciting is it to see someone like this doing so well, and for us to be able to get this kind of talent coming to Australia. Just awesome. So for those of you who are interested in the Buzz, you can download that free off the Businesswomen Australia website. There's a big tag up the top on our mini bar. Download or have a look at it online. It's fantastic. And that, of course, we've got Kerrie-Anne Turner as well. I think I had another little one here. No, I didn't get that one of Kerrie. I had a screenshot which I didn't drop in. But Kerrie-Anne is going to kick off. Kerrie-Anne is one of those visionary leaders in STEM. She's had a very impressive career in VP and MD roles. So she's been very much sort of a leader in having to drive those growth strategies, helping organisations embrace quite often software as a solution, so the SaaS sort of and cloud-based solutions. She's been on many boards. In fact, she's still on boards, and she's a very loved and highly regarded keynote speaker. So we're very lucky to have her. She was head of business and commercial channels in Australia and New Zealand for VMware, and she was in that role since 2015. The deputy chair speaker and lecturer at eLead, Global Centre of Excellence and Learning, or Excellence for Leadership, Engagement and Development. And she's a board member of the Fundraising, Advocacy and Marketing Committee of Family Planning in New South Wales. So you can see why she's such a popular keynote. So we're very fortunate to have both these amazing ladies here today. I'm going to get Kerrie-Anne, if you can kick off things and just give us some thoughts from your point of view about why strategic alliances are important in today's environment, you know, and what your experiences of strategic alliances have been.
Thanks, Lyn, and thank you for such an incredible welcome. Being in technology, I'm going to make a quick announcement. I have a slightly unstable internet connection, and I've just been doing some troubleshooting behind the scenes. So if I do falter, just pop a note to me in the chat box, and I'll keep swapping those connections. So Hayley's smiling; she gets that and understands that. So don't be afraid to let me know if my connection falters a little bit there. So thank you for such a warm welcome, and what an incredible group of women to spend the afternoon with. The topic is all about partnerships and strategic partnerships, and I think if we look back to last year, I think we broke the mold on partnerships. And if you'd have asked me perhaps about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, why they were so important, I probably would have given you a slightly different answer. I think the disruption that 2020 and a pandemic caused meant that we pushed ourselves, you know, to Hayley's point, you know, we did 10 years worth of digital transformation in weeks. We saw big and small corporations deploying the necessary technologies to keep their employees engaged, keep the health and welfare of their employees at top of mind, but also to keep their businesses running. So the notion of why they're so important, without sounding like a boring record, is they provide an opportunity for us to go where we think we couldn't possibly have gone with a business. And I know that, without jumping the gun a little bit here, Lyn, I know this is potentially one of your questions in the Q&A, but, the notion of out-of-the-box partnerships or what's something that we've seen that's different. To me, last year, if you'd have said that Qantas would have been partnering with Woolworths to deploy pilots to do essential work in their stores, would have been unheard of in terms of a strategic, alliance. I think one of the opportunities for us going forward around growth of our businesses, we've traditionally looked at partnerships by saying, well, this is my strategic vision. This is what I want to achieve. Who's going to help me scale? And we've had a very singular view of partnerships. And I think we've got an ability now to have agile partnerships. We've got an ability to have partnerships that serve different purposes for a collective good. And I know there's a few people who know me on the call. I can certainly see a few folks. I can see Judy, I can see Lucia. I talk about something about platforms of ecosystems of partnerships. What I mean by that is there is no one hierarchical model anymore for partnerships. So particularly in the tech space, it was a vendor who might have had a technology to sell, who created a series of partnerships that served them versus really served customers or served those partners coming together. I think we've got a real opportunity right now to jettison jettison traditional models of partnership and absolutely extrapolate our growth with thinking about a platform. The platform being, what are the businesses or the skills or expertise that I need to put together that as a collective we can create something better than the sum of its parts. That's a hard notion because often you're putting together competitors in some respects. Hayley will know that from a technology perspective, some of your IP is your IP and you want to hold that. Sometimes you might compete with certain partners to deliver or implement technology. I think we've got to let go of some of those shackled thinkings of how we've traditionally viewed partnerships, because if last year taught us anything, it's a new playbook.
That is just nailing it, isn't it? It's what we were considering and what the notions of strategic alliances have been completely thrown out. And a lot of the strategic alliances were very much focused on business development, product development, IP. I mean, your example is a classic example of a strategic alliance that was really around looking after people and caring. It was a caring attitude and a recognition for long-term survival. How do we hold on to and care for our people so that we can, it's a much more of a people-oriented alliance. Hayley, tell us, your thoughts from your experiences with the development of partnerships and strategic alliances.
Yeah, I mean, Kerrie-Anne hit it, on the nail on the head there with it. It really was a shift to what's important to me and my company to now what's important to the customer. Pros, we were very invested in helping our customers solve problems, and everybody had to completely shift and react to last year. So, if we think about the companies we deal with, they're major enterprises. So everything from supply chain, sourcing the product, pricing the product, selling the product, getting it to the customer really quickly. There is no one single technology provider that can do all of that. So it's really important to understand and reach out to different partners to say, hey, how can we help this customer succeed and have a seamless buying experience for their customers? So I think, I think Kerrie-Anne hit it on the nail on the head there.
And so in terms of your specific experiences of partnerships? What are the sorts of things that you found to be great partnerships, Hayley?
I think great partnerships really come down to trust. I think that is something that you have to have in order to have a great partnership. And coming out to Australia 4 years ago, and like I said, I've been with Pros almost 10 years now. Whenever I first started, I was on the implementation side, and being able to partner with multiple other vendors and other implementation companies, developing a trusted relationship there was really important, and that carries on, throughout time, as well as partnering with the customer. I think we can think of partners as, just other technology providers or other people that can serve us, but really making sure that we're also considering that customers can be your partner as well. So using that and really having that in my first 5 years of actually delivering software really taught me a lot. And as I moved into sales, and when I, like you're saying, made the journey from Oklahoma to Texas to all the way out to Australia, that was really important for me. When I came to Australia, we had a few customers, but really for the most part, when you would go talk to somebody, they didn't know who Pros was. And whenever you have that, it's really important to understand, who do you have success with, for example, in the US and Europe. And one of our, big technology partners is Microsoft. Microsoft is a trusted brand. So whenever we came out here, we really started working with Microsoft, because if you could walk into a room and say, hey, we partner closely with Microsoft, you're going to get the customer's trust. And if you have success stories there, that goes a long way. If we didn't have that, it would probably be a lot harder. So yeah.
I love that example of actually of picking, an organisation that is already within your client base that loves you and is going to champion you and knows what you're about. And through whatever it is that you've already developed this sort of deep relationship with, those trust factors are there. What about you, Kerrie-Anne? What are your thoughts about, what are the great examples of partnerships that you've experienced, and what are the elements that made them so good?
Just touching on something that Hayley talked about was partnering with your customers. Judy Pridmore's actually, I can see Judy on the chat box there. Sorry, on the screen. Judy was actually one of my customers. Hey, Judy, many years ago. And one of the things that was really interesting for me is the authenticity with which Judy educated the technology company I was working for at the time around what her organization needed. And that improved a number of things for us. And Judy will probably be quite modest. She probably won't realize how much she did impact how I thought about our project models and how we delivered project outcomes. And that's because we partnered with Judy, and she helped us understand where we weren't necessarily delivering those customer outcomes. This wasn't about an economic partnership in such that Judy or my company financially benefited more from it. What we did is we developed further processes and customer, processes that increased our satisfaction. So there are many types of partnerships. And so that was something that has stuck with me about being able to have true trust-based relationships with customers to move things forward. And often, in many times, customers will want to collaborate with you, will want to, if you're pre-releasing something, whether it's a product or a technology, or you want to test that, being able to do that in a safe space with a customer is the best type of partnership you can bring to bear. But I think the other ingredients for great partnerships really comes back to being really clear on the strategic intent. What is it I do? What is it I need somebody else to do for me? And how is that going to come together to either be financially beneficial for us, it's going to benefit our people, or it's going to benefit the community in some way? But also remembering those things change over time. So the partnership that you might start with may not be the partnership you end with. So constantly thinking and reevaluating that partnership and making sure we're coming back together to make sure it's a benefit to both parties. I think one thing I've certainly been guilty of in my roles is really thinking about the outcomes of what I need to achieve with the company that I'm working with at the time. And yep, that's important, but you sometimes leave people behind, whether that's the people you're working with in your customers or your strategic partnerships, and really thinking about that vision and what is it you're setting out to achieve, and making sure there's consistent economic benefit or other benefits for those organizations. They're probably two that stick out for me. So thank you, Judy. You impacted us more than you knew.
So on the other side, on the reverse side, Kerrie-Anne, what are the sort of the challenges or the pitfalls or the things that can go wrong? What can we learn from things that you might have even experienced?
I think one of the challenges when you get to companies of a certain size, and I know, Hayley, you're talking about the partnerships with Microsoft, which are incredibly beneficial. I think you do tend to lose sight when you're working with larger organizations of the outcomes that are trying to be delivered. And I think you've just got to have a level of realism around the size and scale of those partnerships. But ultimately, coming back to thinking about the benefit for both organizations will always bring you back on track. I think also being realistic around what you're trying to achieve with your business, how you're going to get there, and what partnerships you need along the way. Thinking about that and being honest when the partnership has run its course as well. Doesn't mean you won't be coming back next year as your products and services evolved and your needs come back together, which is this notion of platforms, of partnership ecosystems. That's really important so that you can move in and out of these relationships, as and when they are beneficial to the collective is really, really important. And I think for me, certainly about, in my experiences, I've probably been most guilty of thinking about the here and now and what I'm trying to achieve and losing sight of the benefit to the partners in the ecosystem on occasion. And really coming back to thinking about that is important, because ultimately that's where your growth happens.
And Kerrie-Anne, while we've got you, at a personal level, it's individuals developing relationships, and at different levels within an organisation, depending on the complexity of the partnership and the complexity of the players, can it get unravelled where there's different values and different personalities that don't work together? I mean, how important is that human element, to these sort of concepts of alliances?
Absolutely. It can come undone really, really quickly and easily. And I think from my experience working in larger companies, we also had the ability to bring in career professionals who are managing our strategic alliances. But bringing in that depth and experience is important. But conversely, I worked in smaller organizations where that was on a number of us on the executive staff, but also on our sellers as well, to develop those relationships and partnerships. And I think the alignment of values of an organization and the cultural alignment is important. There's no doubt about it, particularly if you're a small to medium-sized business. That alignment of values are often the things that are going to propel you forward faster. And I think that's really important, because if there's a misalignment of those values or goals, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of cycles working on something that you're actually not going to be able to execute. And it doesn't mean that it's not valuable IP. It just means there's a misalignment around, the North Star. Are we lining up behind what we expect to line up behind? But conversely, those relationships can work well for you when you've got those executive relationships. When they are tight, you can unblock things that are really important at an executive level. So having the sponsorship, depending on the size of your organization, at multiple levels inside an organization is really important, because we all need help sometimes to unblock something and move a project forward, or create an idea, or bring in resources when we need it to.
So I was very involved in different strategic alliance kind of facilitation as a child of the 90s in Korea. We did a lot of sort of after hours things, with our strategic partners, a lot of, going to bars together, going out to dinner, getting to know each other at a personal level. It's interesting. Does that happen now? And of course, in the world of digital and international and global, you can't just and we can't anymore just jump on a plane and go and take someone out for dinner and get to know them. I mean, what are those challenges now about developing those real human connections?
Well, I'll throw to Hayley as well too, because for me, you're talking to the world's biggest introvert. So I'm really comfortable not hanging out in a bar, right? That's not what I do. And I think it's really important to understand that those human connections can be made in many forms, and how we network, particularly as women in business, is different to potentially how men network, but it doesn't mean we can't blend those two things together. And I think in terms of the human connection of forming partnerships in what is the Zoom, I guess, generation, that's not a bad thing. I think we've all learnt that you can form those relationships, and as long as they're built on fairly solid foundations of understanding the strategic intent, trust, and a level of engagement, then you could be on the moon and form a strategic partnership. I think that notion of, I've got to wine and dine, for me personally, is a little bit archaic. But that is very separate to the notion of human contact. They're different things. Hayley?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever I took over alliances for pros, it was at the beginning of COVID. So I didn't even have the chance to go meet anybody face to face. But I think it was nice because, you're in no makeup and you're just in your home. And you actually did kind of get to more of a personal level. And I think it actually helped me get closer to them quicker than if I would have, been in a business suit going to the office, pitching to them, having that conversation. I think it kind of broke things down that you're just a normal person. And I think that it was just, you're kind of, just a little bit more in your element.
Unapologetically human.
Yeah. And you're all kind of going through the same thing. It's an equal playing field. Everybody's in the same boat. It's not one person going through it, it's both of us. But yeah, I mean, going back to some of the challenges, with that is, you do need to try hard, and going back to the trust thing, where you want to make sure that whenever you do get the chance to work together, that, you are ready to go, you have the resources ready to go, and, you're performing at your best. Because, when you get that first shot, you just want to make sure you're giving it your all, because that first experience that the partner has with you is going to echo throughout the company. And especially, with you're saying Microsoft being one of the biggest ones, it's definitely very important to make sure that one experience, it was actually, an opportunity over in Western Australia. So, making sure that, we nailed that opportunity together was really kind of set the tone for everything. If we were to say, oh yeah, we can do that, but we actually didn't have the right resources, the product couldn't do it, and we completely misrepresented what we could do, that could have completely tarnished the relationship. So I think that's something to think about. And I've had to be patient, especially, again, going back to one of our key partners being Microsoft. I mean, we also have Adobe and SAP, which are very big technology partners, and it's not built overnight, right? Again, you're talking, it's about building the trust and being patient and, getting success together. So I think don't expect it to happen in a week or a month. From what I've learned, and Kerrie-Anne, I'm not sure if this is your experience as well, but it takes a lot of time.
100%. And I think that's one of the challenges that certainly I've experienced, is that there's an expectation that the partnership should be delivering incremental revenue growth or top line growth instantly. It just doesn't happen like that. And, particularly if you're developing a consulting partnership, that is years of investment of resources. And that comes back to knowing about your strategic intent. What are you trying to achieve? And what is this partnership going to give you? It might not be your partnership goal in the next 12 months, but in 3 years, you might want it to look like X. And therefore, you are going to need this type of partnership. You need to start developing those relationships, several months or years in advance to get to where you need to be. Doesn't mean you don't have those instant gratification partnerships earlier in the piece. It just means you've got a multi-phased approach to growing your business, which will require different things at different stages, depending on what your customers need.
It's playing that long game, isn't it? And really understanding in your whole business strategy, you know, where it is that you want to be investing in sowing those seeds that, you know, may take a while to sprout, and having lots of different opportunities sort of bubbling away, I guess, that you're developing, because they're not all going to come to fruition at the same time. So what are some of the sort of out of the box or unusual partnerships that you've seen? Hayley, perhaps over to you. Have there been any that you've seen in your industry or within your organisations that you've worked that have been unusual?
You know what? I honestly haven't heard of any. So I was Googling. I Googled just to understand, like, what are some of the unusual partnerships? And I mean, you know, Kerrie-Anne mentioned one, the Qantas and, you know, Woolies, which is a great one. But I had found one, and it was NASA and Lego. And that was a partnership where you basically had a toy maker. NASA reached out to this toy maker to basically help in aerospace design. And I just thought that was an unusual one. So that's probably the most out of the box. Very interested to hear Kerrie-Anne's.
I think spot on. Point in case, we don't tend to push the boundaries of innovation with our partnerships, and I think that's a problem. I really love that idea of NASA reaching out to Lego to solve a problem that is, you know, engineering and mechanical in nature, that could be quite a symbiotic partnership. And I know this because we just built the Apollo model. My son and I just built the Apollo model, so clearly there was reciprocity there. But I think that therein lies the challenge and the problem around, you know, breaking the mold of what we think traditional partnerships should or can be. And I think we've got to break down some of those, you know, stereotypes or some of that traditional thinking if we're going to continue to innovate. I think also from a social, an inclusion perspective, diversity and inclusion perspective, and a corporate social responsibility perspective, I think there's something that I really love that Dell did, a couple of years ago now. And unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the Indigenous organisation, but there was this incredible Indigenous woman, and she was part of national parks, and she realised that there is a story to be told on the art or the Indigenous carvings that are all through our national parks. And she wanted to use the idea of technology and AI and imaging so that you could literally walk through a national park and hold up your phone and scan an image or a painting on a rock and understand about what that story was telling you, what the Indigenous story was telling you. And I was absolutely saddened that it took her almost 2 years to find a technology partner to help her with that. And I was like, how is that possible that that organisations in Australia, big or small, aren't reaching into our Indigenous communities and helping them drive education like that? How do we let things like that happen? So to me, that is somewhere where you might not necessarily see a logical connection. Well, there's a huge logical connection between tech and raising the voice and educating for our Indigenous heritage. And so that is something that really stuck with me. And I remember, being quite annoyed listening to this keynote. I think it was at a Dell Tech forum, and being quite annoyed that how did it take this woman multiple years to find a technology partner to help her bring this idea to life? I think that's where we have an opportunity to be curious and push into our networks with an idea. And if someone doesn't know someone or can't answer something, maybe they know someone who does, and just keep pushing through those networks. And that's where I think BWA is really awesome from a networking perspective. There's got to be someone who can refer me to someone who can help me solve this problem or bring this idea to life. I think we've got to do more of that.
Yeah, so anyone who's on the call today who's tuned in, if you've got an example of an interesting strategic alliance you want to share, just throw it into the chat box. We'd love to have a look at that at the end. But what we'll do is keep moving on. So what are the sort of stages of developing a strategic alliance? For those of us who have tuned in, because we're really at that stage in our organisation where, I guess how do we identify who's a good strategic alliance, and then how do you get that happening, and then how does that roll out in terms of the life cycle of that relationship? Kerrie-Anne, perhaps you can give us an overview, and then we'll kick over to Hayley.
Gosh, how long's a piece of string?
I know.
There are multiple
Very
answers.
high level we're talking.
But look, there's multiple answers depending on your business, the size of the business and what you're trying to achieve. But I'll come back to a point I've made a couple of times, which is, what is your strategic intent? What are you trying to deliver with your business? And once you're very clear on that, and also that multi-year plan of what that business may look like, and then beginning to think about where your skills are and where those partner skills are, and looking at that intersection. That's the first step. What am I trying to do, and who can help me do it in its simplest form? And once you get a sense of that, something that I do is I do a little bit of a Venn diagram, which is your little, overlapping. What is, if I need A, B, and C skills, who do I know that's in my ecosystem already, or am I looking for new skills, and where are those skills overlapping? And you tend to ultimately come down to a set of target. I also then have made a point of, particularly when we're trying to break into new businesses, is going out and meeting and inquiring with as many new businesses as possible. In this case, back with VMware, where we were really looking to push into establishing our AWS cloud partnerships, where were those really cool, innovative cloud technology partners that were doing things that would never have considered working with VMware in the past? How do we go out and meet and find and understand what they're doing? Because they might not see us as relevant today, but they may see us relevant in 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 months' time. So the what, the who, and then the last, in its simplest terms, one of the things I love to do, picking up on your fail fast conversation, Lyn, at the beginning, is I love to think big. What am I trying to achieve? Start small, scale fast, and then fail fast. Because we may have the best intentions as partners, but it might not be right for both of us for many reasons. Doesn't mean we don't come back to that. We can jettison that idea and move on to the next idea. And then the last thing I do, which is actually then continuation, it's the last thing, because obviously you've got to establish those partnerships, but it's a constant, is I measure. So what did we set out to do? Is this working for us? What are the metrics we've put in place around what a successful partnership looks like? It could be revenue generation. It could be eyeballs on a social post, whatever it is you're doing. What's the measure we're going to have, and how do we know when it's successful or where we need to reinvent it? So that's what I've typically done in its very simplest form. And there's plenty of permeations, and I'm sure Hayley's got quite a few as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, pretty similar. I mean, what I do is, again, coming back, making sure you both, have a common, value statement, what you're trying to drive together, and, what is your competitive advantage together. Making sure whoever you're talking to in that partnership, whether it's an account executive or if it's a customer success manager, what are their goals and how can you help them achieve them? So going back to the personal level of peer-to-peer, how can I help you? How can you help me? And once you get that, really understanding what are your target industries or markets, and then from there, like Kerrie-Anne's saying, go fail fast. So, or succeed fast, I guess, whichever one. But you want to make sure that you can really identify some key targets that you want to go after. Just be very specific. Let's see if we can do this. And if you can do it, that's great. Really formalize it. Make sure you have some executive engagement within the company as well. Across both your partnerships, and if you do fail, make sure, reflect on it, see if it's meant to be. If it is, perfect it, right? Reflect and perfect. And if you're successful, going back to building the trust, make sure that you can get a joint case study going. So what went right, and how was your customer successful? How were you successful together? And what were some of the benefits that you got out of the partnership as well as the customer?
I love this idea of starting small. I think that quite often strategic alliances fail when we start too big. And it's really nice because if we start with a small project or something that's identifiable, measurable, and easier to succeed in, then it generates not only the understanding and the way that we do things in the different organisations, but also gives you the chance to then work on that, main success, but also say, how can we do that better for the bigger project that's going to have more challenges? So I love that idea of bringing in those concepts of having a big goal but starting small, and really sort of really pushing that through as quickly as you can within the parameters of being, managing risk and ensuring that you're taking everyone that you need to take in terms of stakeholders along with you. What was coming up for me then too was, for organisations and for some of our startups that might be on, identifying strategic alliances can be much more challenging because they haven't got any of those existing frameworks in place that big organisations have. What would be your advice to them, Hayley?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, if you're trying to find who do I, reach out, what is the right partner for me, taking a step back and, looking at any gaps or areas where your competition is beating you, and understanding who in that space can I partner with that can help me get that competitive advantage. And then understanding, are they, a trusted name in the market? So, I think making sure, going back to the Microsoft story, I know they're one of the bigger ones, but again, coming to Australia and, Australia is very much like, that's great, you've got it over in the US, that's great, we're in Australia now. So it was still, this repetitive, I need to really help them understand the value that I can bring, which does take some time. But also asking your customers, who they partner with and who they trust. Because, don't be shy to ask them, who are some of the trusted companies that you're working with or providers? And whoever they're working with, piggyback off of that, because that's already something that you have in common with that partner that you can then take to them. We have a similar customer. Listen, can you help me do X, Y, Z?
And Kerrie-Anne, what would you like to add to that for people who are sort of really starting out in an enterprise space? Where do they start? Do they have to, is it important to map out that ecosystem that Hayley's just described?
Look, no doubt it's important. You've got to, we all use Google Maps. We've got to know where we're headed to and why we're headed there, what our purpose is. But there's something that I think I learned a little bit too late in my career, which is imperfect progress versus delayed perfection. And I think that notion of the imperfect progress is a great way to describe those partnerships, particularly if you're forming new partnerships to build something that is innovative or groundbreaking, and you're trying to do something different. You're going in with that expectation of imperfect progress versus delayed perfection, because we can sit there and navel gaze and think about what the perfect strategy for the partnership to achieve the outcome is, but we can also just get going and know that if we're moving forward, where then I think, Hayley, you said perfecting, or you made a great comment.
Perfect and reflect.
Perfect and reflect. That was it. I wrote it down and perfect and reflect.
Reflect and perfect. Sorry,
yeah,
I have that backwards.
That's
it.
That's it, right? That is exactly the same thing. Moving forward and saying, okay, let's get something going. And I think last year taught us that. I think there's lots of things we put in our way about why we can't do something. And there's certain things we have to be cognizant of. If you're a smaller business, then yeah, you're going to have, not a lot of capital to waste. So you want to get it as right as you can to start. But conversely, if you've got, if you're a not-for-profit and you have an ability to experiment and make some groundbreaking innovation that will move the cause forward, then, go for it. I think we've got a real opportunity to reinvent how we think about going to market collectively for a greater good too. And ultimately, I think customers and consumers are asking for it. I certainly know when I'm, and pros would be the same, Hayley. I'm sure when you're selling to your customers, you know, when you're doing responses, RFPs or tenders, they want to know your ethical approach. You know, are you a sustainable company? What does your supply chain look like? How are you, you know, are you ethically, you know, building this product or this service? And so I think that opens up just a world of opportunities for us as well.
And that is actually a great way to, I think, to sort of wrap up. I'd really be interested in, you know, your thoughts, both of you, about that pressure on corporations, big and small, in terms of this social license to operate. I mean, we're seeing, you know, I have 4 young adults, 18, 21, 23 and 25, that I've birthed. And they are incredible and representative of this amazing generation that is just not sitting back and doing what they're told. They're saying this world needs change. They're our future investors, they're our future leaders. They're demonstrating, they are really getting us all to stop in our tracks and look at what our organisations stand for, you know, what the greater good is that we're actually all working our butts off to achieve. You know, in terms of, you know, sort of final words and wrapping up with that sort of thing in mind, you know, what are the sorts of things that you would like to leave us with as advice, you know, as leaders in our worlds and in the roles that we can sort of make an impact on?
Hayley,
go ahead. Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, I guess it comes back to trust, and everything comes down to trust. And that's, you know, having trust with your customer, having trust with your partners, and having trust with your team, and in multiple ways. I mean, and again, definitely with going back to your sustainability point, you know, your customers are going to want to know how you operate ethically, and that they can trust you. And there's not going to be any big scandals or anything like that, that you not only, you know, sustainability, but diversity and inclusion. And I guess for me, it comes down to trust.
And I think I would leave the parting ideas or comments. I would ask everyone to just challenge the status quo, challenge the traditional thinking of partnerships, because we are the pathway for the next generation in terms of the world that they create. And I think we've got a real opportunity. If COVID taught us nothing, we have an ability to challenge the status quo. We did. Particularly this nation has survived incredibly well. And I think we've got to challenge the status quo, challenge the way we've always done things with our, you know, approached our partnerships to deliver either economic outcome, social impact, or, you know, create, you know, a better world for the next generation that follows.
Love that.
Well, that is absolutely awesome advice and inspiring, and each of us has that opportunity to really, you know, create a different future, and one that is different than what we've actually been a part of in the past. So it's exciting times ahead. I think the value of strategic alliances, both of you have certainly demonstrated through your examples and the wisdom and the sharing that you've so openly taken time out to give to us today. So thank you, Kerrie-Anne Turner. Thank you, Hayley Glasgow, all the way from Oklahoma. We'll look forward to more of these kinds of in-depth discussions. I'd like to thank everyone who's taken time to join us online today. We're all so busy, and we see these things and we go, oh God, I really want to do it, and so often just don't get there. But so many of you amazing people have jumped on and joined us today, and anyone who you think should see the recording, let them know. It will be up on the Business Women Australia website for everyone to share. I'm going to actually stop the recording, but anyone who wants to stay on and have a chat, we'll be on for another 15 minutes. So we'd love you to stay on board and let us know sort of a bit about you and your business and what you're interested in terms of strategic alliances. That would be great too. So I'll just stop this recording now.